The plantation's white-columned facade gleamed under the harsh summer sun of 1836 Charleston. Magnolia Grove stood as a monument to Southern prosperity, its grandeur masking the horrors that transpired behind its pristine walls. Sarah Bennett, 18 years old, with skin the color of burnished copper, carefully arranged fresh flowers in the parlor, her movements deliberate and quiet. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked relentlessly, marking each second of her captivity. "Girl!" The sharp voice of Master Edward Blackwood cut through the silence. "Where is my afternoon tea?" Sarah froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Coming right away, Master," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Edward Blackwood was not just her owner, but her uncle by blood. A fact known only to him, Sarah, and her mother Elizabeth, who worked in the kitchen. Sarah's mother had been Master Blackwood's half-sister, born of their father's relationship with an enslaved woman. When their father died, Edward had claimed both Elizabeth and her daughter as property, rather than acknowledging them as kin. As Sarah hurried to the kitchen, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the plush carpeting, she passed the small room where her cousin, Master Blackwood's legitimate daughter, Amelia, sat practicing piano. The girl, only 16, nodded curtly at Sarah before returning to her music. They had played together as children before Sarah was moved from the house to the quarters at age 10, when Blackwood's wife began to notice the resemblance between them. In the kitchen, Elizabeth worked silently, her face lined with years of suffering. She was 35, but looked much older. "Here," she murmured, handing Sarah a silver tray with tea service. "Be quick, but don't spill anything." Sarah nodded, carefully balancing the tray. As she turned to leave, her mother grasped her wrist. "The overseer mentioned Master Blackwood is planning to sell Thomas tomorrow." Thomas was Sarah's childhood friend, and secretly her sweetheart, though such attachments were discouraged and dangerous. A cold dread washed over Sarah. But why? "He's the best field hand on the plantation." Elizabeth's eyes, so similar to Sarah's own amber-flecked brown, darkened. "Because he sees how you look at each other. Master Blackwood has plans for you." The weight of her mother's words settled like a stone in Sarah's stomach. She had noticed Master Blackwood's gaze lingering on her lately. The same predatory look he had given her mother years ago. The same look that had resulted in Elizabeth bearing another child that had been sold away at birth. Sarah delivered the tea with trembling hands. Edward Blackwood sat in his study, ledgers open before him, calculating the worth of human lives as casually as one might tally household expenses. "You've grown into quite a young woman, Sarah," he remarked, not looking up from his papers. "It's time you contributed more to this household's prosperity." "Yes, Master," Sarah responded automatically, though dread coiled in her stomach. "I've noticed your friendship with that field hand, Thomas." Blackwood finally raised his eyes to meet hers, his gaze cold and calculating. "Such attachments are impractical. You are far too valuable for that." Sarah stood frozen, her face carefully blank, despite the terror surging within her. Master Blackwood continued, "Your mother produced good, strong children. I expect the same from you." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Later that evening, as Sarah returned to the cramped quarters she shared with 5 other enslaved women, she found Thomas waiting in the shadows near the path. His tall frame was tensed, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. "They're selling me tomorrow," he whispered urgently, "to a plantation in Georgia." Sarah's world collapsed around her. "No, they can't." "Listen to me," Thomas interrupted, his voice intense. "There's talk of a way out. A man who helps people escape north. They call him the Conductor." "The Underground Railroad?" Sarah whispered, having heard rumors of the secret network helping enslaved people flee to freedom. Thomas nodded. "Meet me by the old oak at midnight. We'll run together." The risk was enormous. Captured runaways faced brutal punishment, sometimes death, but staying meant a future of unimaginable suffering, being forced to bear children who would be sold away, living under the control of a man who viewed her as both property and object of desire. As midnight approached, Sarah lay awake on her thin pallet, listening to the breathing of the women around her. Elizabeth entered silently, kneeling beside her daughter. "You're going," she stated simply, no question in her voice. Sarah sat up, surprised. "How did you—" "A mother knows." Elizabeth pressed something into Sarah's hand, a small cloth bundle. "This was your grandmother's. She was taken from Africa. It contains her memories and a map. Inside was a small carved wooden pendant and a scrap of fabric with what appeared to be directions sewn into the pattern. "You should come with us," Sarah pleaded. Elizabeth shook her head, tears gleaming in the darkness. "My time for running has passed, but you must go and never look back." She embraced her daughter fiercely. "Remember who you truly are, not property, not Blackwood's niece. You are Sarah, daughter of Elizabeth, granddaughter of Adana from the Igbo people." The plantation bell rang 11 times. Soon, Sarah would need to slip away. Elizabeth held her daughter's face between her calloused hands. "If you make it north, find a man named William Cooper in Philadelphia. He knew your father, my half-brother who was sent away. He can help you." "My father?" Sarah had never known she had a father who wasn't a white man. "James was your father. Edward had him sold when he discovered us together." Elizabeth's voice broke. "Now go, before I lose my courage to let you leave." With one final embrace, Sarah slipped into the night, carrying only her grandmother's pendant and the clothes on her back. The air was thick with humidity, cicadas creating a symphony that masked her footsteps as she crept toward the ancient oak tree where Thomas waited. The plantation's main house loomed in the distance, windows dark except for Master Blackwood's study, where a single candle burned. Sarah could make out his silhouette as he paced, perhaps reviewing tomorrow's sale of Thomas, unaware that his plans were unraveling. As she reached the oak, a hand suddenly clasped over her mouth. Sarah nearly screamed before recognizing Thomas's scent. "Sorry," he whispered, releasing her. "We need to be careful. Patrollers are out tonight." In the dim moonlight, Sarah could see 2 other figures, Mary, a young woman from the neighboring plantation, and Isaiah, an older man who worked in the stables at Magnolia Grove. "Isaiah knows the way to the first safe house," Thomas explained quietly. "It's 10 miles north, near the river." Isaiah nodded gravely. "We move quietly. Follow the North Star. No talking unless necessary." As they prepared to depart, a twig snapped in the darkness. All 4 froze. Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. "Who's out there?" came a familiar voice that made Sarah's blood run cold. Amelia Blackwood, the master's daughter, emerged from the shadows, a lantern in her hand. Thomas instinctively moved in front of Sarah, shielding her with his body. Amelia's eyes widened as she took in the scene. The 4 enslaved people clearly poised for escape. For a moment no one moved or spoke. Then, surprisingly, Amelia lowered her lantern. "Father will be furious," she said quietly. Her next words stunned them all. "You have perhaps an hour before he checks your quarters, Sarah. He told me of his plans for you." Sarah couldn't comprehend what was happening. Amelia, who had ignored her existence for years, was now facilitating their escape. "Why would you help us?" Isaiah asked suspiciously. Amelia's eyes met Sarah's. "Because what my father does is wrong. And because—" she hesitated, "because I know Sarah is my cousin. I've always known." Before Sarah could respond, distant voices and the baying of hounds broke the night stillness. "They've discovered someone missing," Isaiah whispered urgently. "We must go now." Amelia thrust the lantern into Sarah's hands. "Take this. There's a patrol on the west road. Go north through the marsh. The dogs lose the scent in water." With one last look at her cousin, her blood relation who had finally acknowledged her, Sarah followed Thomas, Isaiah, and Mary into the darkness, away from Magnolia Grove, toward an uncertain future, but one that contained the possibility of freedom. Behind them, the plantation bell began to toll frantically, signaling an alarm that would soon have every white man in the county hunting for them. Sarah clutched her grandmother's pendant as they ran, silently praying for strength, for speed, for the chance at a life where she owned herself. The journey to freedom had begun, but the terrors of pursuit were just unfolding. Dawn broke with an angry crimson streak across the eastern sky as Sarah, Thomas, Isaiah, and Mary emerged from the swamp they had traversed through the night. Their clothes clung to their bodies, soaked with brackish water and sweat. Mosquito bites covered their exposed skin, and exhaustion weighed heavily upon them. "We need to keep moving," Isaiah urged, his voice barely above a whisper. "They'll have search parties out as soon as there's enough light." In the distance, the baying of hounds occasionally pierced the morning stillness, each howl sending jolts of terror through Sarah's body. The dogs were trained specifically to hunt humans, to track the scent of frightened slaves across miles of wilderness. "How much further to the safe house?" Thomas asked, supporting Sarah, whose feet were bleeding from the sharp cypress knees hidden beneath the murky swamp water. Isaiah pointed north. "Another 5 miles. There's a Quaker settlement. A woman there, Martha Jenkins. She'll hide us until nightfall." Mary, the youngest of their group at just 16, trembled visibly. "What if the patrollers find us first? I heard they cut off a man's feet last month when they caught him running." "They won't find us," Thomas insisted, with more confidence than he likely felt. "The water masked our scent. We just need to reach the Quaker settlement." As they pressed forward through dense pine forest, Sarah found herself reflecting on all that had happened in the span of just 12 hours. Her life at Magnolia Grove, though filled with hardship and indignity, had at least been predictable. Now everything was uncertainty. Every shadow might be a patroller. Every sound might signal capture. By midday, the July heat had become oppressive. The group moved more slowly now, conserving their strength. They had no food, and only the occasional drink from streams provided sustenance. Sarah's stomach clenched with hunger, but the fear of capture overshadowed her physical discomfort. "There," Isaiah suddenly whispered, pointing through a clearing. A small farmhouse stood in the distance, with a red quilt hanging on the clothesline, the signal they had been told to look for. Just as hope surged within them, the unmistakable sound of horses and men's voices drifted from behind. The patrol was close, too close. "Run!" Thomas hissed, grabbing Sarah's hand. The four broke into a desperate sprint toward the farmhouse, abandoning any attempt at stealth. As they emerged from the tree line into the open field surrounding the farm, shouts erupted behind them. The patrol had spotted them. "Halt! Stop right there or we'll shoot!" A gunshot cracked through the air, the bullet splintering bark from a tree just inches from Mary's head. The girl screamed, stumbling to her knees. Isaiah turned back, pulling her up. "Keep moving!" From the farmhouse, a woman appeared on the porch. She waved frantically, pointing not toward her door, but toward a small cellar entrance partially hidden by overgrown shrubbery. Thomas reached it first, yanking the wooden doors open. "Get in!" he urged, helping Sarah down the dark steps. Mary followed, with Isaiah bringing up the rear. The cellar was pitch black and smelled of damp earth and potatoes. They huddled together, scarcely daring to breathe as heavy boots thundered overhead. The woman's voice could be heard, calm and steady. "No, sir, I haven't seen any runaways. Just hanging my washing as I do every Tuesday." "We saw them head this way, ma'am." The patrol leader's voice was suspicious. 4 of them, property of Edward Blackwood and the Wilkerson plantation. Perhaps they continued on toward the river. I've been out here all morning and saw no one cross my land. The conversation continued above them, each moment stretching into an eternity of terror. Sarah clutched her grandmother's pendant so tightly that its edges cut into her palm. Finally, after what seemed like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes, the sound of horses moving away brought cautious relief. The cellar doors opened, and the Quaker woman, Martha Jenkins, peered down at them. "They've gone for now, but they'll be back. Come quickly." Inside the farmhouse's modest kitchen, Martha Jenkins, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, provided them with their first meal since escaping: cold cornbread, dried apples, and water. "You can rest here until nightfall," she explained, her voice low. "My husband will return then with a wagon. We can hide you under a false bottom and take you to the next stop, about 30 miles north." As they ate gratefully, Martha explained more about their journey ahead. "The man who can get you to Philadelphia, Jacob Montgomery, he's expecting 4 runaways next week. You'll need to travel by night, hide by day. It's nearly 200 miles from here." 200 miles. The distance seemed impossible. Sarah's feet throbbed at the mere thought. "What news do you have of the search?" Isaiah asked. Martha's expression darkened. "Edward Blackwood has offered a substantial reward. $500 for each of you returned alive. He seems particularly determined to recover his niece." Her eyes rested on Sarah knowingly. Sarah felt her blood run cold. "How did you know?" "We have friends in many places, child, even among the house slaves at Magnolia Grove." Martha touched Sarah's hand gently. "Your mother sent word through our network months ago that you might one day need help. She wanted us to know who you truly were." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. Her mother had been preparing for this moment long before Sarah herself had considered escape. As the afternoon waned, Martha provided them with clean clothes, salve for their wounds, and straw pallets in the root cellar where they could rest. Before leaving them, she handed Sarah a small package. "A letter from your mother," she explained. "It came through our network 2 days ago, almost as if she knew you would choose now to flee." Alone in the dimly lit cellar, Sarah unfolded the letter with trembling fingers. Her mother had taught her to read in secret, a dangerous skill for a slave to possess. "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, you have found courage I feared I had lost. Master Blackwood knows I helped you escape. By the time you read these words, I will have been punished. Do not weep for me, daughter. Each lash is worth your freedom. What I could not tell you before, your father, James, is alive. He escaped to Canada 15 years ago. Find him in a settlement called Dawn, near London, Ontario. He has never stopped hoping to reunite our family. Remember who you are, not property, not Blackwood's secret shame. You are my daughter, my heart, my hope for a future I will never see. With all my love, your mother." Elizabeth Sarah pressed the letter to her chest, silent tears streaming down her face. Thomas sat beside her, offering wordless comfort, while Mary and Isaiah slept fitfully nearby. "We will make it," Thomas promised softly, "for your mother, for all of them." Night fell, bringing with it Martha's husband, John Jenkins. He was a tall, solemn man, whose weathered face betrayed no emotion as he led them to his wagon. "The bottom has a false compartment," he explained, removing straw to reveal a hidden space beneath the wagon bed. "It's tight, but it will conceal you from patrols." One by one they climbed into the cramped, airless space. John replaced the false bottom and covered it with straw and sacks of grain. The weight pressed down on them, making breathing difficult. Sarah felt Thomas's hand find hers in the darkness. "Courage," he whispered. The wagon lurched forward, beginning the next leg of their journey. Every bump in the road jarred their already battered bodies. The air grew stifling, and Sarah fought against rising panic. She focused on her breathing, on the feel of Thomas's hand in hers, on her mother's words. "Remember who you are." They had traveled perhaps 10 miles when the wagon suddenly stopped. Muffled voices came from above, a patrol checkpoint. Sarah's heart hammered so loudly she feared it would give them away. "Evening, John Jenkins," a voice called. "What brings you out so late?" "Delivering grain to the mill," John replied evenly. "Got a late start today. Mind if we take a look?" The sound of men climbing onto the wagon sent waves of terror through the hidden fugitives. Boots walked directly above them. A sword or pike was thrust into the grain sack several times, missing their hiding place by inches. "Seems clear," the patroller finally announced. "Be careful out here, Jenkins. There are dangerous runaways about. Blackwood's offering a fortune for their return." "I'll keep my eyes open," John promised. As the wagon resumed its journey, Sarah realized she had been holding her breath. In the suffocating darkness, she repeated her mother's words like a mantra. Not property, not Blackwood's secret shame. You are my daughter, my heart, my hope. Hours later, when they were finally allowed to emerge from their hiding place at the next safe house, a small cabin deep in the woods operated by a free black man named Solomon, Sarah gulped the fresh night air as if it were the sweetest wine. Solomon, grey-haired and stern-faced, assessed them quickly. "You'll stay here 2 days," he announced. "Patrols are thick on the roads ahead. We need to wait until they move on." The cabin had a hidden cellar beneath the floorboards where they would hide if danger approached. Solomon explained that he had been born free in Massachusetts, but had moved south specifically to help with the Underground Railroad. "My own parents escaped from a plantation not far from here," he told them as he tended to their wounds and offered a simple meal of beans and cornbread. "Every soul I help north is repayment of the debt I owe to those who helped them." That night, as they rested on pallets in the tiny cabin, Sarah dreamed of her mother. In the dream, Elizabeth stood tall and proud, her back unmarked by the overseer's whip, her eyes clear and hopeful. She pointed north toward a distant shore where James, the father Sarah had never known, waited with open arms. Sarah awoke to the sound of dogs barking in the distance. Solomon was already up, moving quickly around the cabin. "Into the cellar," he ordered. "Now." They scrambled through the trapdoor into the earthen cellar below. Solomon closed it above them, sliding a heavy piece of furniture over the entrance. In the darkness, Sarah clutched her grandmother's pendant and her mother's letter. The barking grew louder, then stopped directly above them. Men's voices, the stomping of boots, Solomon's calm responses. Mary began to whimper softly. Isaiah placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Be still," Thomas whispered. "Remember what's at stake." What was at stake was not just their lives, but their humanity, the right to exist as more than property, to love, to build families that couldn't be torn apart at an owner's whim, to own their own bodies and labor. The voices above grew heated. Solomon's protestations of innocence met with skepticism. Then came the sound that made Sarah's blood run cold. Furniture being moved, floorboards creaking. They were searching for the hiding place. The patrollers' boots scraped across the floorboards directly above their heads. Sarah held her breath as dust filtered down through the cracks. Mary trembled beside her, tears streaming silently down her face. "There's got to be a cellar or something," a gruff voice insisted above them. "These abolitionist types always have hiding places." Solomon's voice remained steady. "Search all you want. This is a simple cabin. I've nothing to hide." The sound of furniture being dragged across the floor intensified. They were methodically checking every inch. Sarah clutched her grandmother's pendant, silently praying to ancestors she had never known, but whose blood and resilience flowed through her veins. Thomas pressed his lips close to her ear. "If they find us," he whispered, so faintly she could barely hear, "run for the creek behind the cabin. Follow it north. Don't wait for any of us." Sarah shook her head fiercely, refusing the very thought of leaving him behind. A sudden thud directly above them made them all freeze. One of the patrollers had stamped his foot just inches from the trapdoor entrance. "This board sounds different," he called to his companions. Isaiah closed his eyes, his lips moving in silent prayer. Mary stifled a sob. What happened next would be etched in Sarah's memory forever. As the patroller began to probe the suspicious floorboard, Solomon's voice changed, taking on a tone of panicked confession. All right, he cried. "I'll show you where they are." Sarah's heart plummeted. Had their protector betrayed them? Heavy footsteps moved away from the trapdoor toward the back of the cabin. Solomon's voice continued, pitched high with apparent fear. "They're not in the house, they're in the smoke shed out back. I only did it because they threatened my life." The patroller's boots thundered out of the cabin. In the brief silence that followed, the trapdoor lifted slightly. Solomon's face appeared in the narrow opening. "Now," he whispered urgently, "while they're checking the shed. Through the root cellar tunnel, it leads to the creek bed. Follow it north for 2 miles to a split oak. There's a cave behind it. Go." They scrambled out of their hiding place and toward a narrow tunnel entrance hidden behind a stack of vegetable bins. It was barely wide enough for Isaiah, the largest among them, to squeeze through. "What about you?" Sarah asked Solomon, suddenly realizing he would face the patrollers' wrath when they discovered his deception. The old man's face was calm, determined. "I've lived free for 63 years. I know the risks I take. Now go." The tunnel was a nightmare of darkness, constriction, and the scent of damp earth. They crawled on hands and knees, unable to see anything ahead or behind. Several times the tunnel narrowed so severely that Sarah feared they would become trapped forever in the suffocating blackness. After what seemed like hours, but was likely only minutes, they emerged into the relative openness of a dry creek bed, sheltered by overhanging willows. In the distance, they could hear the patrollers' angry shouts as they discovered Solomon's trick. "Run!" Thomas urged, helping Sarah to her feet. "They'll bring the dogs next." The creek bed provided some cover as they fled northward, the water masking their scent from tracking hounds. The July moon cast just enough light for them to avoid the worst obstacles, though all four acquired fresh cuts and bruises from falls on slippery rocks. 2 miles seemed an eternity when every step was taken in terror. When they finally spotted the split oak Solomon had described, Mary was nearly collapsing from exhaustion. The cave entrance was well hidden, covered with vines and brush that had been arranged to appear natural. Inside, they found evidence of previous occupants. A small cache of supplies, dried corn, jerky, a tinderbox and blankets. "We should rest," Isaiah decided, once they had crawled deep enough into the cave to be hidden from view. "Just a few hours, then we continue north." Exhausted beyond words, they huddled together for warmth in the damp cave. Despite her bone-deep weariness, Sarah found sleep elusive. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, heard Master Blackwood's threats, felt the suffocating press of the wagon's false bottom. "What are you thinking?" Thomas whispered beside her, apparently also unable to find rest. Sarah clutched her mother's letter. "I'm thinking about Canada, about my father who I've never met, about whether we'll actually make it." Thomas's hand found hers in the darkness. "We will." "How can you be so certain? The odds are against us. Most runaways are caught." His voice was quiet but firm. "Because we have to. Because the alternative is unthinkable. Because your mother sacrificed herself so you could be free." The truth of his words settled heavily upon her. Failure would dishonor not just their own dreams, but the courage of everyone who had helped them. Her mother, Amelia, Martha, and John Jenkins Solomon. "If we make it," she whispered, "what then? What kind of life can we build?" Thomas was silent for a long moment. "A life where we choose our own path, where we marry if we wish, have children who will never be sold away from us, where we own our labor and the fruits it produces." The simple dream, one that white Americans took for granted, seemed almost too precious to contemplate. "I want to learn to read properly," Sarah admitted. "My mother taught me basics, but I want to read everything. Books, newspapers. I want land," Thomas replied, "soil of my own to work, where the harvest belongs to me." Such modest dreams, yet so revolutionary for those who had been defined as property. Dawn came too quickly. Isaiah roused them with gentle persistence. "We must move. It's 10 miles to the next safe house." Their bodies protested, feet blistered, muscles aching, stomachs hollow with hunger. But the fear of capture provided motivation that pain could not overcome. They traveled north, keeping to forests and swamplands when possible, avoiding roads and settlements. By midday, the July heat had become oppressive. Mary, the youngest and smallest among them, struggled to keep pace. "I can't," she finally gasped, collapsing against a tree trunk. "I need to rest." Isaiah looked torn. Their safety depended on reaching the next safe house before nightfall, yet Mary clearly couldn't continue without rest. 1 hour, he finally decided. "We'll find water, eat some of the jerky from the cave, and rest." They located a small stream where they could refill their water gourd and soak their swollen feet. The cool water was blissful against Sarah's battered skin. As they ate small portions of the jerky, Isaiah kept watch, his weathered face creased with concern. "Tell us about yourself, Isaiah," Sarah requested, hoping conversation might distract them from their discomfort. "You've barely spoken of your own past." The older man's expression remained guarded, but after a moment he sighed. "Not much to tell. I was born on a rice plantation near Charleston. My mother died young. My father was sold away when I was 10. I learned horses, became valuable as a stable hand." His voice took on a harder edge. "Had a wife once, and a son. Both sold to different owners when Master Wilkerson hit hard times." The simple tragedy, told without self-pity or dramatization, struck Sarah deeply. How many thousands of similar stories remained untold across the South? "What will you do if we reach Canada?" Thomas asked. Isaiah's face softened slightly. "Find them if I can. There are people who help locate sold-away family. If not," he shrugged. "Learn to live free, I suppose." The hour passed too quickly. Mary seemed somewhat revived by the rest, food and water, though worry lines still etched her young face. As they prepared to continue their journey, a distant sound froze them all in place, the baying of hounds. "They've picked up our trail," Isaiah said grimly. "We need to reach water, throw off the scent." They abandoned caution for speed, running northward toward a river Isaiah believed lay a mile ahead. The dog's baying grew steadily closer. Sarah's lungs burned, her legs threatened to buckle, but terror drove her forward. When they finally reached the river, a broad, slow-moving expanse of murky water, a new problem presented itself. "I can't swim," Mary confessed, eyes wide with fear. Neither could Sarah, though she didn't admit it aloud. Swimming was not a skill most enslaved people were permitted to learn. It made escape too feasible. Isaiah assessed the situation quickly. "We'll cross together. Thomas and I can swim enough to keep you both afloat. Stay in the shallows when possible." The water was shockingly cold despite the July heat. Sarah gasped as it rose to her waist, then her chest. Thomas held her firmly, guiding her deeper into the current. "Keep your feet up," he instructed. "Let your body float. I won't let you go." Behind them, the dogs had reached the riverbank. Men's voices shouted commands, followed by gunshots that sent water spraying around them. Sarah bit back a scream, forcing her legs to keep moving. The river's current grew stronger toward the center, threatening to sweep them downstream. Isaiah struggled to support Mary while keeping his own head above water. For a terrifying moment, they both disappeared beneath the surface. Thomas released Sarah, diving toward where they had submerged. Sarah flailed in the water, panic threatening to overwhelm her as she fought to stay afloat. Her head went under once, twice. Water filled her nose and mouth. "This is how freedom ends," she thought wildly, "not with the overseer's whip, but with river water in my lungs." Then strong hands gripped her, pulling her upward. It was Isaiah, his face streaming with water, one arm supporting Mary, who coughed violently. "Keep moving," he gasped. "Thomas is ahead." Together they fought the current, inch by agonizing inch. The opposite shore seemed impossibly distant. Another volley of shots rang out, but the patroller's aim was compromised by the distance and the fugitives' partial submersion in the water. When they finally dragged themselves onto the northern bank, all four collapsed in exhaustion. They had no time to rest, however. The patrol would surely cross at a shallower point upriver. "We need to keep moving," Thomas urged, helping Sarah to her feet. "The safe house can't be more than 5 miles now." Their wet clothes weighed them down, chafing against already raw skin. Mary had twisted her ankle during the river crossing and leaned heavily on Isaiah. Their pace slowed dramatically, each step a testament to human endurance pushed beyond reasonable limits. As dusk approached, Isaiah suddenly stopped, head tilted as if listening. "Horses," he whispered, "coming from the north." Sarah's heart sank. Had the patrol somehow circled ahead of them? "Off the path," Thomas ordered. pulling Sarah toward a dense thicket of underbrush. Quickly, they concealed themselves as best they could, scarcely breathing as hoofbeats approached. Through gaps in the foliage, Sarah could make out two riders, a black man and a white woman, both dressed in simple Quaker clothing. "Hello!" the man called out, reining his horse to a stop near their hiding place. "We're friends. Martha Jenkins sent us to find you." Still, they remained hidden, suspicious of a trap. The woman spoke next, her voice gentle but firm. "We bring news. Solomon was arrested, but he told the patrollers you drowned crossing the river. They've called off the search on this side." Slowly, cautiously, Isaiah emerged first from the hiding place. "How do we know you're truly friends?" The man dismounted, approaching with open hands to show he carried no weapons. "Solomon said to tell you, remember who you are, not property." The words from Sarah's mother's letter, words Solomon had overheard in the cabin, confirmed their legitimacy. Relief flooded through Sarah so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "I'm Nathan," the man introduced himself. "This is Rachel. We're taking you to our farm for the night. Tomorrow we continue north." For the first time in 2 days, Sarah allowed herself to believe they might actually succeed in their escape. The road ahead remained long and fraught with danger, but the immediate threat had passed. Solomon's sacrifice had bought them precious time and distance. As they rode double on the Quaker's horses toward the promised safety of the farm, Sarah gazed up at the stars emerging in the twilight sky. Somewhere in that same sky, her mother might be looking up as well, perhaps from a punishment shed at Magnolia Grove, perhaps from a worse place. And farther north, a father she had never known might be watching the same stars from freedom's shores. "Not property," she repeated silently, "not Blackwood's secret shame. I am Sarah, daughter of Elizabeth and James." The path to freedom stretched before her, each step taking her closer to claiming her full humanity in a world determined to deny it. The Quaker farm was a modest homestead tucked away in a small valley, invisible from the main roads. Nathan and Rachel lived simply, their 2-story farmhouse plain but welcoming. Their 3 children, ranging from 5 to 12 years old, regarded the fugitives with curiosity, but asked no questions, having been raised to understand the dangerous but necessary work their parents undertook. "You'll stay in the attic," Rachel explained, as she led them up a narrow staircase. "It's not comfortable, but it's safe. The windows are covered, and we have a system to warn you if patrols approach." The attic was indeed spare, just pallets on the floor, a washbasin and chamber pot. But to Sarah and her companions, it seemed luxurious after days of caves, tunnels, and forest floors. "We can't thank you enough," Sarah said, voice breaking with emotion. Rachel shook her head firmly. "No thanks needed. We do this because it's right." She provided them with clean clothes, salve for their wounds, and promised hot food once they had rested. That night, as they ate Rachel's hearty vegetable stew and cornbread in the attic, Nathan brought news of the world beyond their hiding place. "Edward Blackwood has increased the reward for Sarah," he informed them gravely. $1,000 now. He's claiming you stole valuable property when you fled." Sarah nearly choked on her stew. "I took nothing but the clothes on my back and this." She touched her grandmother's pendant. Nathan nodded. "It's a common tactic. Charges of theft give them legal grounds to pursue you even into free states." He hesitated before continuing. "There's also news about your mother." Sarah set down her bowl, heart pounding. "Is she—" "She's alive," Nathan assured her quickly. "But she was severely punished. 30 lashes. She's being held in the plantation's punishment shed." Oh, the relief of knowing her mother lived was tempered by the knowledge of her suffering. 30 lashes could kill, especially if the wounds became infected. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "There's more," Nathan continued reluctantly. "Blackwood has sold her. Once she recovers enough to travel, she'll be taken to a plantation in Alabama." The news struck Sarah like a physical blow. If her mother was sold deeper south, the chances of ever seeing her again, even if Sarah reached freedom, became vanishingly small. "Can nothing be done?" Thomas asked, placing a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. Nathan and Rachel exchanged glances. "We focus our efforts on those we can help directly," Rachel explained gently. "To attempt a rescue from Magnolia Grove itself would endanger our entire network." Sarah understood the logic, but felt the pain of it keenly. Her escape had secured her mother's worst punishment. The guilt of it threatened to overwhelm her. Later, when the others slept, Sarah remained awake, her mother's letter clutched in her hand. The words blurred through her tears. "Do not weep for me, daughter. Each lash is worth your freedom." Thomas stirred beside her. "You should rest," he whispered. "Tomorrow will be difficult." "How can I rest knowing what she suffers because of me?" He sat up, his face barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the covered window. "Not because of you, because of Blackwood, because of a system that views people as property." His voice was gentle but insistent. "Your mother made her choice. Honor it by continuing forward, not by drowning in guilt." The wisdom of his words didn't ease the pain, but it helped Sarah find resolve. She would reach freedom for herself, for Thomas, for her mother who had sacrificed so much to make it possible. The next morning, Nathan outlined the journey ahead. "We're taking you to a safe house in Pennsylvania, about 100 miles north. It's operated by William Cooper." Sarah's head snapped up at the name. "William Cooper. My mother mentioned him in her letter. She said he knew my father." Nathan nodded. "Cooper's been with the railroad for 20 years. He helps coordinate passage to Canada, especially for those looking to reunite with family." He spread a crude map on the attic floor. "We'll travel at night, using the wagon. During daylight, you'll hide at safe houses along the route." The journey would take approximately 10 days, moving only at night to minimize the risk of discovery. Nathan would accompany them the entire way, while Rachel remained at the farm to maintain appearances and continue the family's legitimate activities. That evening, as they prepared to depart, Rachel pulled Sarah aside. "I have something for you." She pressed a small bundle into Sarah's hands. "New identification papers. They identify you as Sarah Freeman, a freeborn black woman from Philadelphia." Sarah unfolded the papers with trembling fingers. The document was convincingly official-looking, with an elaborate seal and signature. "These are forgeries?" Rachel nodded. "Excellent ones. A former engraver in our network creates them. They won't withstand intense scrutiny, but they might help if you're stopped casually." She met Sarah's eyes seriously. "Keep them hidden until you reach Pennsylvania. They're useless, dangerous even, while you're still in slave territory." The false papers represented a new identity, not a slave, not property, but a free woman with the right to travel, to exist without an owner's permission. Sarah carefully tucked them into the hidden pocket Rachel had sewn into her new dress. Their departure was delayed by an hour when Nathan's oldest son, acting as lookout, reported a patrol passing on the main road. They waited in tense silence until the boy confirmed the patrol had moved on. Finally, under cover of darkness, they climbed into Nathan's wagon. Unlike John Jenkins' wagon with its false bottom, this one concealed them in a specially constructed compartment behind what appeared to be a solid rear panel. The space was cramped, but not as suffocating as their previous hiding place. As the wagon rumbled away from the farm, Sarah offered a silent prayer for Rachel and her children, who risked their own safety and freedom to help strangers escape bondage. The journey north was a blur of night travel, daytime hiding, and constant fear. They passed through small towns where sympathetic Quakers, free blacks, and other abolitionists provided shelter. Some safe houses were little more than crude cabins. Others were substantial homes with hidden rooms specifically designed to conceal fugitives. 7 days into their journey, disaster nearly struck. They were traveling along a less used road when the wagon's wheel struck a deep rut, cracking the axle. The damage was too severe to continue without repairs. "We're still in Maryland," Nathan explained grimly. "Slave territory. We need to hide while I get the wagon fixed." The nearest safe house was 5 miles away, too far to risk traveling on foot in the open. Instead, Nathan led them to an abandoned barn half a mile from the road. The structure was dilapidated, but offered concealment from casual observation. "Stay here," he instructed. "I'll take the wagon to a blacksmith in the next town who's sympathetic to our cause. With luck, I'll return by tomorrow night." Left alone in the barn, the 4 fugitives created makeshift beds in the hayloft, positioning themselves to watch the surrounding countryside through gaps in the weathered boards. They had food and water for 2 days, hopefully enough until Nathan returned. The first day passed in tense silence. They took turns keeping watch, speaking little to conserve energy and maintain alertness. By the second day, anxiety began to mount. "What if he's been captured?" Mary whispered, voicing the fear they all harbored. "What if he was recognized as an abolitionist?" "He'll come," Thomas insisted, though doubt shadowed his eyes. As dusk approached with no sign of Nathan, they faced a difficult decision: continue waiting, potentially without food, or risk traveling on foot toward the safe house Nathan had mentioned. "I say we wait one more night," Isaiah counseled. "Moving on foot in open country without a guide, the risk is too great." They agreed to wait until morning, though sleep proved elusive. Sarah found herself repeatedly touching the hidden pocket containing her false papers and her mother's letter, as if to reassure herself that both freedom and family remained possible. Dawn broke with no sign of Nathan or the wagon. They were discussing their limited options when Isaiah, on watch at a gap in the barn's eastern wall, suddenly hissed a warning. "Riders! Coming this way!" They scrambled to better hiding positions, burrowing into the mouldering hay of the loft. Through the gaps between floorboards, Sarah could see 3 men on horseback approaching the barn. They wore no uniforms, but carried rifles and had the unmistakable bearing of slave catchers. "Spread out," the leader ordered. Jenkins' wife finally broke. "Said they're headed to Pennsylvania with 4 runaways. They have to be passing through this area." Sarah's blood ran cold. Rachel had been questioned, perhaps arrested. Had Nathan met the same fate? The men dismounted, tethering their horses to a fence post. One approached the barn door, pushing it open with the barrel of his rifle. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that penetrated the gloom. "Check inside," the leader commanded. "I'll circle around back." The floorboards of the hayloft provided minimal concealment. If the men climbed the ladder, discovery was inevitable. Sarah held her breath, acutely aware that the slightest sound would betray their presence. The man below moved cautiously through the barn's ground floor, prodding haystacks with his rifle. The leader's voice called from outside. "Anything?" "Not yet. Checking the loft next." The ladder creaked as the man began to climb. Sarah exchanged a desperate glance with Thomas. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. After coming so far, their journey would end here, in a forgotten barn in Maryland. Suddenly, a shout came from outside. "Riders coming! Looks like a patrol!" The man on the ladder paused, then descended quickly. "Patrol? What are they doing out here?" "Don't know, but we better move. We don't have permits to operate in this county." The slave catchers retrieved their horses and galloped away, evidently more concerned about territorial disputes with official patrols than continuing their search of the barn. The 4 fugitives remained frozen in their hiding places, uncertain whether this was merely a temporary reprieve. Minutes stretched into an hour as they waited, listening for any sound that might indicate the patrol was approaching the barn. Finally, hoofbeats did approach, a single horse, moving at a walk. They tensed again, preparing for discovery. "Sarah? Thomas? Isaiah? Mary?" A familiar voice called softly from outside. "It's Nathan. Are you there?" Relief flooded through them. They emerged cautiously from the hayloft to find Nathan at the barn door, his face haggard with exhaustion. "Thank God," he breathed, seeing them alive and unharmed. "We must move quickly. The wagon is repaired, waiting down the road." "We saw slave catchers," Isaiah informed him. "They mentioned Rachel." Nathan's expression darkened. "She was questioned." Neighbors reported suspicious activity at our farm. She revealed nothing, but they're watching the house now." His voice broke slightly. "Our children have been sent to my brother's home for safety." The sacrifice of this Quaker family, risking not just freedom, but their very lives and the safety of their children, humbled Sarah anew. They traveled without rest that night and the following day, hidden in the wagon as Nathan pushed northward with increasing urgency. The Maryland-Pennsylvania border lay just ahead, the line between slave territory and free soil. Crossing that invisible boundary would not guarantee safety. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 allowed slave catchers to pursue runaways even into free states. But Pennsylvania, with its stronger abolitionist presence, offered better chances for protection and assistance. As they approached the border, Nathan became increasingly vigilant. "There are likely watchers," he explained, "paid informants who monitor major crossing points." Instead of using the main road, he guided the wagon through a series of back trails and cattle paths. The rough terrain made for slow, jarring progress, but it reduced their chances of encountering patrols. The actual moment of crossing into Pennsylvania was anticlimactic. No signs marked the border, no physical barrier separated slave territory from free soil. Only Nathan's quiet announcement, "We're in Pennsylvania now," signaled the transition. Sarah had imagined she might feel different somehow, lighter perhaps, or suddenly transformed. Instead, she felt the same fears, the same exhaustion, the same uncertainty about their future. "Don't be disappointed," Thomas whispered, seemingly reading her thoughts. "Legal freedom and true freedom aren't the same thing. We've achieved one. The other comes with time." 2 more days of travel brought them to William Cooper's home on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Cooper was a formidable figure, a free black man in his 60s who had helped hundreds of fugitives continue northward to true safety in Canada. When Sarah mentioned her father's name, James Bennett, Cooper's weathered face broke into a rare smile. "James Bennett, yes, I remember him well. Determined man, intelligent, escaped in 21, as I recall." He studied Sarah's face. "You have his eyes." Cooper confirmed that James had indeed settled in Dawn, the Canadian settlement Elizabeth had mentioned in her letter. He became a carpenter there, built a good life. Last I heard, he was helping establish schools for refugee children. The news filled Sarah with a bittersweet longing. A father she had never known had created a life of dignity and purpose in freedom, a life she might soon share if they completed the final, dangerous leg of their journey. Cooper outlined the path ahead. "You'll travel by night, moving between safe houses. The last stretch will be the most dangerous, crossing Lake Erie into Canada. Patrols watch the shoreline, and Blackwood has agents in every major port." Sarah wasn't surprised that Edward Blackwood continued to pursue her so relentlessly. She represented not just valuable property to him, but a shameful family secret, living proof of his father's relationship with an enslaved woman and his own immoral designs on his niece. "How soon can we leave?" Thomas asked, his determination undiminished despite weeks of hardship and narrow escapes. 3 days, Cooper replied. "We need to arrange guides for each segment of the journey." He looked at Sarah thoughtfully. "In the meantime, there's someone here who'd like to see you." He led Sarah to a small back room where a young white woman sat nervously by the window. It took Sarah a moment to recognize her. Amelia, Edward Blackwood's daughter, rose, her usually composed face streaked with tears. "Sarah, you're alive. Thank God." Cooper discreetly withdrew, leaving the cousins alone. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, stunned by the presence of her former master's daughter so far from Charleston. Amelia's hands twisted in the fabric of her dress. "After you escaped, Father was monstrous. He had your mother whipped, then sold her contract. When I protested, he locked me in my room." Her voice faltered. "I overheard him arranging my marriage to Colonel Winthrop, a widower of 60 with a reputation for cruelty toward his wives." Sarah recalled Colonel Winthrop, a frequent visitor to Magnolia Grove, whose leering gaze had made all the female slaves uncomfortable. "So you ran away too," Sarah concluded. Amelia nodded. "I took money from Father's safe, enough to bribe a ship's captain to bring me north. I didn't know where to go, but I remembered the name William Cooper from when I helped you escape. I found him through abolitionist circles." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The plantation owner's daughter and his enslaved niece, both fugitives, both seeking freedom from the same man's control. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Amelia admitted. "I can never go back. Father would force the marriage or worse." She hesitated. "Cooper suggested I might go to Canada as well. There's a settlement of exiled abolitionists near where your father lives." The prospect of continuing their journey together, of forging a new kind of relationship based on chosen kinship rather than the distorted bonds of slavery, was both strange and compelling. "We leave in 3 days," Sarah told her. "You're welcome to join us." The final leg of their journey to Canada would prove the most perilous yet. Slave catchers and federal marshals enforcing the Fugitive Slave Act were particularly vigilant along the border with the British territory that had become a haven for thousands of escaped slaves. On their last night in Philadelphia, Sarah sat with Thomas on the porch of Cooper's home, gazing northward at stars partially obscured by city smoke. "We're almost there," Thomas said quietly. "A few more days." Sarah nodded, her mind filled with competing emotions: hope for the future, grief for her mother whom she might never see again, anxiety about meeting a father who was a stranger to her. "What will we be to each other in freedom?" she asked Thomas suddenly. The question had lingered unspoken between them throughout their dangerous journey. Thomas took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Whatever we choose to be. That's what freedom means. Choice." He hesitated, then continued softly. "I would choose to build a life with you, if you wanted that too." The simple declaration, impossible to voice in their former lives, where enslaved people's marriages held no legal standing and could be broken at an owner's whim, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "I would choose that too," she whispered. As dawn broke on their final day in Philadelphia, Cooper gathered the 5 travelers, Sarah, Thomas, Isaiah, Mary, and now Amelia, in his kitchen. "The road ahead is dangerous," he told them solemnly, "but hundreds have walked it successfully before you." He handed each of them small parcels containing food, a map, and a letter of introduction to contacts along the route. "Trust your guides. Follow instructions exactly, and remember, you're fighting not just for yourselves but for all who remain in bondage." Well, their journey would take them west along the Pennsylvania border, then north through New York State to Lake Erie, where a sympathetic boat captain would transport them across the water to British territory, to freedom. As they prepared to depart, Cooper took Sarah aside. "I've sent word ahead to your father in Dawn. He knows you're coming." He pressed something into her hand, a small daguerreotype in a simple frame. "He sent this years ago, asking me to give it to your mother if she ever escaped. I think he'd want you to have it now." The image showed a dignified black man in his 40s, simply but neatly dressed, his expression serious but with kindness in his eyes that, as Cooper had noted, resembled Sarah's own. "Thank you," she whispered, carefully wrapping the precious image and tucking it alongside her mother's letter and grandmother's pendant. These 3 treasures, these connections to family past, present, and future, would sustain her through the final dangerous miles to freedom. As they set out from Cooper's home under cover of darkness, Sarah thought of her mother's words once more. "Remember who you are, not property, not Blackwood's secret shame." At last, Sarah understood the full meaning of those words. She was more than a fugitive, more than an escaped slave. She was a woman claiming her birthright of freedom, carrying forward the hopes of generations before her, and creating possibilities for those yet to come. The road to Canada, to true freedom, stretched before them, fraught with danger but illuminated by hope. Whatever awaited them there, they would face it not as property, but as human beings, fully entitled to dignity, choice, and the pursuit of happiness that America had promised but denied to those in bondage. Sarah Bennett, daughter of Elizabeth and James, granddaughter of Adana from the Igbo people, walked forward into an uncertain future with her head held high, not as Master Blackwood's secret shame, but as her own woman at last.